What's the state of your website? If you're looking for a new digital experience platform, or DXP, to run your digital experiences, I have the book for you. The Agile Brand Guide to Digital Experience Platforms is part of my best-selling series of MarTech books. In this book, I explore and demystify DXPs and look at the roles a digital experience platform should play, the different types on the market, as well as how to initially evaluate platforms, then how to best implement a DXP once you've selected it. The book also features a foreword from Rupali Jain, Chief Product Officer at leading DXP provider Optimizely, as well as several other thought leaders in the industry. Learn more and get a copy in print or digital now by going to the Agile Brand Guide website at www.agilebrandguide.com.
Hi, this is Greg. Look for my book, The Agile Brand, on Amazon or on my website at theagile.world. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. I'm excited to introduce this special episode brought to you by TEKSystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. Today, we're going to talk about a very important topic, cloud enablement and DevOps. Organizations are continually trying to find ways to deliver their services better, faster, and more efficiently. This helps them improve existing value streams, find new revenue channels, and operate more efficiently. Thus, organizations are increasingly using what's referred to as microservices, which we'll get into in a lot more detail in a little bit, to transform from relying on monolithic legacy systems and applications to smaller services that are much more manageable and scalable. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Rick Madan of TEKSystems to the show. First, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do at TEKSystems?
Great. Thank you, Greg. And thanks for having us on the show. We're big fans of the show. Also big fans, if I could do, of this right here.
Nice.
The Agile Brand book, little royalty. You can Venmo me later. That's Greg's book, everybody. But seriously, big fans. Thank you. I'm really fortunate to support and lead TEKSystems consulting and professional services organization. I've been with the organization and the company in a variety of different roles for 21 years, but germane to today's conversation, I've been really blessed that during most of that time, I've had opportunities to help continuously evolve what it is that we do, evolve our business models and our capabilities in line with our customers' ever-changing needs. That's really become the nucleus and the center of what we do, what we focus on, what we invest in, and it is our customer. And their needs really have required us to take on a lot more in terms of risk, in terms of complexity. And those are the things that run hand in hand with a lot of the digital and modernization and transformation type opportunities that our industry is currently yielding, much of what you mentioned in the intro there.
Great.
Yep.
So we're going to touch on a lot of different aspects of DevOps today, but why don't we start with talking about why this topic is so important for organizations? So first, what is the driving force for organizations to move from these monolithic legacy applications to microservices?
Good question. A couple big drivers jump out behind that movement. For starters, there's a big cost dimension, a big complexity dimension. Legacy and monolithic apps have typically been patched and modified into oblivion. They become more rigid over time. They become inflexible over time. They're really tough and costly to maintain and to support. Much less try to extend into the cloud, much less try to mine for data insights, all of the kind of digital stuff that we talk about today. So companies are looking to lower their corresponding technical debt that stands in the way of that sort of progress. They're also looking to squeeze out any related waste in that process. And in a waste, which is typically redundancy, redundant process, redundant code bases, some of the patches that don't work with any of the new, more digitally minded technologies that they're trying to harness. That kind of stuff is usually rife across the monolithic environments. And in industry terms, they're ultimately looking to shore up their TCO, their total cost of ownership around those environments. So that's like, I would probably put all those things in sort of the cost and efficiency and automation dimension. But secondly, and probably more exciting, is the dimension where we talk about how microservices enables a lot of this new digital transformation and allows them to iterate faster and allows them to get to customers' needs quicker, better, faster. And I think to capture that a little bit, I liked what one of our partners, Burke Bickler, I think on episode 10 or 11 of Agile World that you had on, Greg, he did a good job articulating that, saying that, quote unquote, the quicker companies can adopt, deploy, and release valuable customer-centric features, the bigger their competitive advantage. So the monolithic, legacy, waterfall-y type environments and applications, they just don't lend themselves to that sort of, easy, quick, and iterative release consciousness. You're looking at those big monolithic environments that are typically defined by either, quarterly releases, by yearly releases. And we know how quick business is moving. We know how quickly customer needs change, how often requirements change. So by the time you're ready to release something, a patch, a software update, a new feature set to improve CX, to improve the customer experience, well, guess what? Things have already changed. So by the time you're ready to, dish out all this new technology, the game has changed. So that is probably going to make up more of the exciting bulk of conversation today on how really microservices and this new DevOps consciousness really is like the expression, the technology expression of what Agile and Lean are doing for us in terms of a methodology, something that you obviously talk a lot about and you're an expert about, Greg. But this is really the technology and software architectural expression of a lot of that consciousness. And at least here at TEKSystems, specific to microservices, we really like how IDC portrays this movement that we in the tech sector are in the middle of what they're calling a massive scale up in IT, and that during the next 5 years, we're going to develop and release as many applications as we had in the prior 40 years inside of IT. I mean, that's just let that sink in for a minute. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. That's a lot of code getting laid down. And really their prognostication that I tend to personally agree with is that at the middle of all of that activity is microservices. MSA, microservice-based architectures, is really serving as the fuel to allow all of that authoring to happen quicker, better, faster, and to really cause this flurry inside of IT right now for app building. So I could keep going on and on. But,
Well, yeah. I mean, so let me. You definitely mentioned a few really interesting things there. So, talking about moving from these legacy applications as a means of lowering total cost of ownership. I mean, definitely strong believer in Agile and the benefits of doing that in everything from from software development to to other things. So talk a little bit about you already mentioned a lot of the benefits of microservices, but maybe for the audience, can you give an example of when an example of what a microservice might be? So moving from this big monolithic thing to what's a good example of that?
So, good example, somebody wants to buy something from Amazon. Let's say they want to buy it in bulk. Let's say it's a school or a superintendent's board or something like that. And they want to be able to federate that spend across a bunch of schools. It's got to be there in a certain date, time, et cetera, et cetera. In the kind of historic sense, that CX, that customer experience that they would go through on the UI, that was probably hooked in different ways and forms to big data sources, big repositories, maybe sitting on-prem somewhere. There might have been some latency in all of that. So even though you've got people just kind of clicking buttons on a cool screen because they want to buy something and they put in their purchase size and how much it's going to cost and what sort of shipping sort of logistics they want to choose. So many things have to happen behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So in the historic sense, there was, and we know this as consumers for, just this little online use case that I'm talking about for retail. Stuff never used to happen or get delivered next day. And it didn't happen in the right kind of box. My order wasn't, always, or, whatever the latest CSAT is, and, 95% accurate to, what I wanted and all of that. And a lot of that had to do with what I was trying to describe is just this, really big dependent kind of hodgepodge architecture where this massive application would have to understand the business logic, connect to the UI, extract from data sources, connect to some kind of logistical supply chain. Oh my gosh, that's just a lot of stuff there, Greg. So microservices starts to decompose all of that down and decompose the logic and decompose the code base and decompose the access and the configuration files and all of the guts that go into kind of making applications run into little pieces, into smaller kind of manageable pieces that can be portable if you containerize them. They can sit on different servers because you're going to be talking to different data sources. And really this is really just the latest architectural style that affords for this, more kind of linear customer experience up front by rationalizing the interior, the architecture, and the software. But prior to this, we do like to say that like microservices is kind of a SOA or service-oriented architecture done right. But even prior to SOA and service-oriented architecture, we had individual web services, if you remember, back in probably mid to late 2000s. And then prior to web services, you had things like component object models and distributed component object models or enterprise Java beans that would encapsulate all kinds of, logic and code and data. So you could communicate in an enterprise across different networks or have different systems on different networks talk to one another through remote procedure calls and stuff like that. So, and not to get too techy, I'll get carried away. No but worries. Yeah, this is, microservices is kind of like the latest generation of all of that almost evolution into way more of a simple, linear, and easier to compute, house, and maintain kind of consciousness.
So to follow that trend a little further, what do you see as, now you talked about a trend line basically starting at web server, or not starting, but including web services and things like that. What do you see? Are we just at the beginning of microservices, or do you kind of see something on the horizon that, and kind of what is driving this? You mentioned cloud, you mentioned, some other things. Like, what are the technologies that are kind of driving this change?
The drivers for this were extreme simplification required, and back to what we were talking about, how we're constantly looking for the technology expression that matches all of the goodness of agile thinking, agile thought, lean thinking, lean thought, where you don't want to repeat yourself. You want to be able to write once and run anywhere. And you don't like all these kind of principles that are sort of woven into agile. And this is just the latest one. So to answer the first part of the question, brother, I have no idea where it's going to go after. I'm sure there will be, something much more effective, because what we've got today is the best of what we know today. But I really like what folks like Gene Kim, if you're familiar with his writings, he wrote Phoenix Project, and one of his big mentors in life, a guy named Steven Spear, who's a big lean and agile writer and speaker, professor at MIT. I really like how they take where we're at with technology now and kind of break it into sort of a visionary place, is that we really are so fallible with our plans when it comes to systems, apps, IT, manufacturing systems. Yeah. And our plans are just so temporal. So we don't really know where things are going to go, but that's why we need an extensible sort of platform with the right type of extensible tools, which is microservices, the architecture. But because we just don't know where things are going to go. That's going to be the result of some sort of iteration where we get to velocity at some point and somebody figures something else out. So it's
right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, you touched on total cost of ownership and kind of the cost equation of savings wise of microservices. So, as an organization is kind of switching from legacy to microservices, what are, some of the challenges that they face, whether it's financial, technical, resources, otherwise, what can an organization expect as they make this transition?
Great question. They can expect a lot. Usually, and unfortunately, if we believe what McKinsey has recently published on digital transformations, because this is, really microservices is just one of many big topics and juicy areas right now that sort of define digital transformation. But in a recent report that they're getting attention for lately, anyhow, they asserted that 70% of these sorts of adoptions and transformations fail, like microservices for a variety of reasons. But really on the ground, I could probably sum all of that up based on our own experience into 3 or 4 categories in terms of challenge. And it's usually because you've either got a talent problem, you've got an organizational or political problem inside the company, you've got a real technical challenge or technical problem, or you have a leadership challenge, leadership problem.
So, when you start working with an organization, I would imagine there are some times where the organization comes to you and says, "Hey, we want you to do XYZ from the start." But if you work with an organization to prioritize, again, they have 20 legacy systems and they all need work. How do you work to prioritize what you work on first? Is it by low hanging fruit? Like, it's easy to do? Is it what's causing the most pain? Is it, I'm sure, some of it varies a little bit, but what's the rationale that you use?
That's really good. We've got a continuously evolving approach for that. And when you use terms like low hanging fruit, that's exactly right. There's a way to score an environment and analyze what is probably the least invasive either workload up front or application up front that you can start to render down for adoption. But a lot of that is contingent upon the leadership inside the given organization, the political organizational considerations that I mentioned before, because some folks will have more bold leadership and they know that they can maybe run 2 environments at the same time. So while you're kind of rendering down and decomposing a big honking old application that's legacy and tough to maintain and all of that, and you're rendering that into something more modern, you're breaking it down, splicing it down into microservices, you're going to migrate it to the cloud, it's going to be leaner and all that cool magic stuff. Really good leaders will say, hey, we're going to go ahead and suck it up and run that environment steady state while we almost have like a digital twin of this thing and really start to render it down almost in parallel. So those are the folks that can usually take on more than just the low-hanging fruit, and they can, almost look for like a bigger, more mass adoption. But yeah, there are many different ways that we score for either invasiveness or the number of data sources, or what kind of velocity usually organizations want to determine for themselves in an ideal state. Lots of different ways to go about it.
Are there? I would imagine probably all of your projects involve the technology team, but are there other teams within organizations that seem a little more ready to adopt? So for instance, HR systems versus financial systems versus, sales, so on and so forth. Like, is there a trend that you see, or does it really just vary by organization?
That's good. And I don't know if you're trying to lead the witness here, but, right now we're seeing, like, in travel, logistics, even airlines, we're seeing applications that drive revenue as being those targets for modernization. We're also seeing applications like in healthcare, some of these claim systems that are massive and cost a ton of money to support, usually with legions of people offshore. Those are also targets. But we could probably break it down, and this kind of goes back to our approach a little bit. I don't think I did it too much justice, but when we kind of move past the whole people and process modernization and we get into what the goals are, because I don't want to miss that here. I don't want to miss that always the company's main business drivers, where they're looking to spur a better CX, a better consumer and customer experience. How are you going to measure that? You're going to measure it by CSAT, by surveys, is it just by, revenue on some of these sites? If it's, a real revenue driving application, is it patient care? If you're in the healthcare space, is it like we're working with an airline right now on a baggage handling application? Is it, the number of lost bags going down? There are many different metrics, many different ways to measure that. And we want to be crystal clear on that up front. Now, granted, that does change too. Those things are always continuously evolving. But once we have a really good feel for what the business value is that the customer is looking to derive from a modernization from microservices, then we usually start to kind of bring them down into features hey, how much cycle time and how many iterations do you want to expect out of this? What areas of front-end CX are you looking to enhance? How many features do you want in production? It usually kind of gets down to that level, and we find a way to measure what success is with our customers. But, oftentimes too, it's just like rendering of technical debt. What kind of TCO compression do you want out of this? Risk. What potential vulnerabilities are you looking to squeeze out of your code base, of your release process, of your application set? Even like bug prevention, ensuring that you're managing for unwanted overhead that usually, like we said, is rife across these big old application environments.
Yeah. So as far as talking a little bit, once a system is once these microservices are implemented, is it safe to say they're easier to maintain, or what does that process look like, and how do you work with organizations? Do you does TEKSystems stay involved in the long term? Do you transition back to some clients, or is it kind of a mix of both? And
it's usually a mix of both, based on some of those other determining factors that we talked about. How much incumbent talent is there? What is the appetite of leadership to be more bold with wider adoption? But I keep wanting to bring it back, Greg, into Agile terms. And if we did our MVP right, our minimum viable product, which is usually the way to go here, when you do find, back to your question on either the low-hanging fruit application set or an environment that gets scored to not be invasive, that you can try this out, that you can experiment with, whichever sort of lever you want to pull as a company, and you build towards an MVP, a minimum viable product, that is where you get to determine your velocity for wider adoption. So again, there are many different ways to support our customers long term. The good news for TEKSystems, shameless plug for us, is that even though we're a very lean, very nimble, very agile-minded integrator and very agile-minded professional services organization, we are connected to the largest talent company, high-tech talent company in TEKSystems globally. So we can scale up or down depending on what our customer needs are across 7 global centers with 4,000 internal folks. It's like we've got something really cool that way. So we not only we dog food when we say, familiar with that term, dog food? Yeah. It's we eat our own dog food when we talk about leanness. It's more than just hyperbole. It's more than just hearsay. We are afforded the luxury of being custom built to give our customers a very lean and agile and pointed and surgical experience with modernization. However, when they find that they want to scale and grow, we have that opportunity to do that with them.
So I guess, I think we covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything you feel like maybe we missed that you want to address as far as your experience or anything like that?
There are, this is such a big topic. I think there's loads of stuff to talk about. We could even go back to some of the leadership stuff that could, some of those challenges that is, depending on your audience and the viewership or the listenership, rather to Agile World, to the podcast. That is something that I can't talk about enough. It is really being bold as an IT leader to stay the course. Because when I see this sort of adoption and these sorts of modernization efforts fail, the root cause can always be pointed back to, having good, strong leadership with a clarity of vision, clarity of mind, and that can really not just set this iterative expectation for the company on what this modernization effort is going to look like, but really point this back to the business outcomes that they want to derive as a function of bringing in a TEKSystems Global Services. Good news is that we're kind of retrofit to help our customers do that, because there's so much complexity initially with this technology. This is just light years ahead of the steady state of how most organizations operate.
Yeah.
But that leadership, and I heard the term recently. I liked it a lot, leanership, like lean leadership.
Yeah.
I really like that a lot, because there's a way to do that and master that and get ahead of the curve of these 70% of transformations that everybody says are failing right now.
I mean, do you see that if the organization, I mean, this is a big transformation. It's a big transformation to Agile, I would say, just in general. I mean, do you see more success rates when the organization itself is either an Agile organization or becoming, in other words, people kind of understand the vocabulary already, and then you're getting in there and transforming things. But to me, it seems like if it's such a foreign concept to, adopt these Agile practices, because their day-to-day is very, let's just call it legacy or waterfall or whatever we want to. Is that safe to say?
Oh man, 100%. And I think back, maybe more shameless plugs, but this time for you. I think it was episode 25-ish, being nimble by listening to the customer. And you were talking, you were talking about vocabulary and talking about Agile language and how you chunk work up into units of measurement like sprints. And that's now evolved in like safe environments, scaled Agile framework into bigger PIs, program increments that are, usually between 4 to 5 sprints. And that, like, what that means and how you get velocity and what story points are and like that, it has to go beyond just language. It really has to permeate that leadership and how leadership is thinking, and how that all kind of boils down and renders down into how developers behave and how they're integrated with operations and how DevOps really functions. And, I do like the high performing stats for DevOps teams. This has been a bunch of analysts lately talking about this, that they are 46%, I think, is the latest. And don't ask me how they arrive at these very arbitrary numbers, but I'm sure it's true, because I can give you what our own experiences. But the high performing DevOps teams that really capture that Agile thought, and it's more than just vocabulary at the systems level and the app level, they're 46% more productive than their kind of non-DevOps peers, and they have 1/5 as many failures. So either massive issues in production that have to get rolled back, or some big vulnerability that gets released into production. And that's just the cool thing about like a DevOps ecosystem right now, is that you really truly get to weave in every little facet and part of the SDLC, the historic software development lifecycle and systems lifecycle, into one experience. That to us is like the cool part of what modernization does. It forces security to be woven into how you're writing code. It forces what we've been hearing about for years through Agile, like things like TDD, test-driven development. It actually forces you to do things like test cases up front. It forces you to do the ops side of dev and ensure that your dev folks and the systems folks that are provisioning servers are, friends and not being hostile towards one another, and working together and really looking to automate that experience and drive down the waste and drive down all the unwanted stuff. While back to our point earlier, is ensuring that they're hitting the high watermarks of what is the business looking to get out of here. And that spirit of stewardship, for the first time in a long time, I personally feel that the promises of Agile are actually being dignified in the way that we have the opportunity to think and act and behave with more compressed technology architectures now.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, Rick, thanks so much for joining the show. Again, I'd like to thank Rick Madan of TEKSystems, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Greg.
If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please rate the show on iTunes or contact me through my website at theagile.world. You can find my books, The Agile Brand and The Agile Web, on Amazon and on my website at theagile.world.